Well, I'm going to ask you some questions about the core principles that are behind your work. But before I do that, we have some still images, some slides which we're going to show.
Oh, great.
So let's go ahead and view the first slide, and maybe you can tell us what that is.
Well,
that looks like you.
Yeah, this is a machine gun nest in Sri Lanka. And normally my team doesn't let me go out in the field. But this time, this is before Sri Lanka's civil war was settled. They actually let me out there, and we were talking to human rights activists. And we came by essentially a military outpost. And I handed my buddy my camera, and I ran over there. I said, can I have my picture taken with the machine gun? They don't let me go out in the field very much anymore because of things like this. But anyway, it was it's really different. I think so many people in Silicon Valley understand talking to their users. What if your users aren't in the Valley? What if they're not even in the United States? Getting out there and actually talking to real human rights activists about what they're doing and seeing the problems they're having give us a lot more insight on what kind of tools we should build them.
Well, as an old software guy, I always knew that you had to go speak to the customers and know what their interests are. And we have another slide up here. What's this one about?
So much of social justice work is around telling stories. So this is actually an example of someone taking stories in a village in South Asia, taking down notes, what happened to your husband? Why was he arrested? Or did your son get, killed or abducted? And so these kind of stories get taken down, and then when people get back to the office, they actually enter those stories into our MARTA software. And of course, nowadays, we're actually moving to where more and more people are collecting this information on a mobile phone. And we have a new set of software that's designed to work on the current generation of Android phones.
So it sounds like no matter what you do, it's going to be recorded. That might or might not get you to stop doing it, but there will be a record of it somewhere, which is a sobering thought.
Well, we believe in transparency. We believe in access to information, right? And what is it? The most powerful disinfectant is sunlight, right? So if we can shine a light on these things, we can't necessarily stop human rights abuses, but we certainly make it harder to carry out these abuses in secret, or as often happens, when people say these things are happening, these abuses are happening, often the people who are apologists for the people who are committing the abuses say, oh no, those people are lying, it didn't happen. If we can prove that's not the case, we can maybe shorten that time delay loop before society does something about that pattern of abuse.
Their cover will run for cover.
We hope so. We hope we can have a little bit of role. But of course, we're the geeks. It's actually the people collecting that information that are taking risks. And our job is making sure that we better defend the defenders of human rights. We don't endanger them, and we actually make them more powerful in their advocacy.
Okay, let's take a look at the next slide if we could.
Oh, so this is an example of where geeks can really make a powerful difference. This is a photograph of the National Police Archive in Guatemala. So 80 million pages from a secret police force that actually operated for about 100 years. And what happened is, the first question the Guatemalans asked us was, is there actual interesting human rights information in there? So we modeled all these giant piles. 80 million pages is warehouse-fulls of documents. We picked 1,500 documents at random, and more than 10% had to do with a disappearance or human rights abuse. So on the strength of that, the Guatemalans were able to raise money from, I think, the Swiss, and actually start digitizing. There's now more than 10 million of these pages are on the web, both in Guatemala and at UT Austin, University of Texas Austin. And now family members can actually find the records of their disappeared brother or cousin or uncle or father, right? And find out what has happened. And based on that, geeks from Benetech actually testified in the trial of two police officers who disappeared, a very prominent labor organizer, and they were actually convicted and sentenced to prison. And some geeks that used to work for us are actually planning on testifying in the genocide trial of the former dictator Rios Montt. Not for any other thing than the analysis and the documentation we did. We're the technical experts that say these documents were gathered in a scientific way. As far as we know, they weren't cooked up, they weren't faked. And in the case of the genocide argument, Benetech people did analysis that said if you were a certain kind of Mayan Indian, local indigenous Indian, your chances of dying during Rios Montt was maybe 8x what it was of somebody else.
And I'm sure there are many places in the world where people die under mysterious circumstances. That seems like a pretty major field in itself.
Yeah. And I think often we're trying to find what's called differential mortality. I mean, a certain number of people die in any society over a certain period of time. But if suddenly the number of people dying doubles or triples, you start going, what's going on here? And in many of these large-scale conflicts, it's not people being shot. It's people being driven off their land, people being starved, people dying of illness, and you can actually see the imprint of, say, an ethnic cleansing or of basically people being driven off their land by the increased mortality rates. And ultimately, someone's responsible for those kids dying, right? And so we want to make sure we understand what the numbers are.
I think we have one more slide. Can we see that? There it is.
Oh, so here's an example of environmental groups. So environmental groups are trying to protect our society, right? And some of them are biologists and field people doing, restoration, trying to measure trees. So it turned out that there was no project management software for environmentalists. That basically the best thing they had when we started this project was an Excel spreadsheet. And so if I was running a construction project, I'd have 50 software packages to choose from. If I run a golf course, I have 4 or 5 software packages to operate a golf course. What if I'm managing a wetlands restoration? What if I'm trying to preserve some primates in China? What if I'm trying to develop a conservation plan for a national park or run a campaign to convince my community to recycle? Now you have one open source and free software package called Marathi from Benetech. And actually, the environmental groups voluntarily send us money so that we can do the next version.
Do you have something like a dream project, something that you would love to work on above all else?
Well, right now, something that, and of course, we're always working on new projects. And so my current, sort of exciting project is we've been looking at how Silicon Valley can do more about climate change. How can we actually help local communities figure out more of what they can do? So we've actually talked a lot to Joint Venture Silicon Valley, which is sort of our local communities here about what they need. And I'd say right now, it's the chase is on. We haven't figured out exactly what the right solution is. We're pretty sure there's some opportunities here where the commercial world's not doing it, and software developers could do something big that could actually advance that. And the other cool thing we're doing, it's sort of a meta project. So many people ask us to do things for them. 100 great ideas come into Benetech every year, and we have to say no to most of them. So we actually created a website called Social Coding for Good that's designed to match up geeks from Silicon Valley companies, other technology companies, up with open source social good projects like Wikimedia, which do the Wikipedia encyclopedia, or Code for America, or Frontline SMS, and actually get those geeks where they work for a day job, making money, and in their volunteer time, they actually help society by helping Wikipedia or one of these other projects, or a Benetech project. So we're trying to actually marshal more of the tech sector, because I think in the heart of most techies, they want to do something that's important. They want to do something socially good. And when I go to a high-tech company, and instead of asking them for cash, I ask them for a free license to their stuff, they say yes 80% of the time. Because people are really proud of what they've created, and yet Silicon Valley is really good at saying, that doesn't make enough money, kill it. And we want to say, no, if it actually helps society, let it live, let a social entrepreneur like us do it, and maybe you can become a social entrepreneur too and see it happen.
So is that model flourishing? Would you say that your work is flourishing and more people are getting involved in it?
Oh yeah, I mean, for the first 10 years, I thought I was a lone nut job in Silicon Valley, not trying to become a billionaire, right? And some of my friends kind of said things like that. Well, how do you make money off of this? Well, we get a salary, but we'll never get rich. I'm like, well, what's good about that? I'm like, well, I'm helping a lot of disabled people. I'm really proud of that. Now I think the word has actually gotten around. I think the dot-com bubble popping, globalization, 9/11, these things have made people think more and more about what we're doing for global society. And so we have a new generation of students that are the most on fire since the 60s, at least that's in my opinion. And we have more and more people thinking about, how can I actually do something good? So we have this class of people. After 10 years, I found out that I was a social entrepreneur. And Jeff Skoll, co-founder of eBay, has a foundation that actually gives money to social entrepreneurs. So we've been very lucky to be supported by Jeff Skoll. And a lot of the things that we're doing help become possible because of donors here in Silicon Valley. And then, we want to see this happening so that there are not just one Benetech, but dozens of Benetechs.
Well, it sounds like you're
doing hundreds.
Like you're doing great work, and I wish you the best of luck. We have to wrap now because we have to close the show. I've been speaking with Jim Fruchterman of Benetech, doing a lot of good things, technology serving humanity. I'm Marty Wasserman. Visit our website, www.futuretalk.net. See you next time. Thanks for coming.